Ayan na. Kamusta naman kayo dyan mga kameta? Let's talk about the latest data, latest analysis pagdating sa ating minamahal na Pilipinas. Katulad nga sinabi ng ating minamahal na senador, buduts pa more, buduts pa more. Yan, balikan natin guys itong mga discussion natin that we need to continue since last week basically. Alam ko marami na naman nagre-react na naman dyan sa mga interventions natin. So today I want to talk about some of the basic data that we have, no? Yung mga available data sets, available mga studies na meron tayo para pag-aralan natin anong dapat mga strategy ng mga team liwanag na lang. Okay? Kung may team kadiliman at kasamaan, may team liwanag. Di ko na papatulan yung suka, yung sinuka at ano nang. So actually kanina may nagpadala din ng mga surveys sa atin. Itong mga internal surveys na to, mga commission surveys na yan. So we were able to check some of these surveys by actually disinterested people, yung mga nagpapadala niya, actually hindi sila tumatakbo. So we actually have some of the numbers for a number of candidates. Pag-usapan natin yan dahil yung mga interventions natin about what should Team Liwanag do or what should in general, no? In general, anong dapat mangyari sa ating parating na elections in terms of messaging, in terms of policy agenda. I want to go back to this because we're looking at actual numbers here and accordingly we give advice. But actually, yung mga advice po natin ay hindi lang base dun sa latest ups and downs in terms of popularity contests and preferences. Dahil hindi naman yun ang standard natin. Medyo mas mataas ang standards natin dyan. Because at the end of the day, if we just go with popularity contest, baka we jump from one clownery to another clownery. Diba? Buduts pa more tayo. Actually, napansin ko yung buduts at saka budol. Diba? Ay medyo nag-rhyme. Diba? So, that's why we really have to have some serious conversation, guys, about ano ba dapat talagang what is the roadmap ahead essentially, no, for Team Liwanag, whoever that is, no. So accordingly, we had a couple of interventions over the past few days at isa sa sinabi ko na talagang nag-trigger ng ating mga kaibigan at Diyos ko naman, kahit mga weekend na nagpapahinga tayo, mukhang busy talaga ng mga troll farms, natatawa ako. Sa sobrang mukhang low budget na katsipangan yung ibang kaibigan natin, ang operations nila hanggang ano na lang, yung mga emoji ratioing, 'di ba? So ang dami ko nakita ng mga kunyari, nag-speech si ganito, si BBM, si ganito, tapos parang 650,000 tawa na emoji. At alam naman natin kayang-kayang gawin 'yan sa AI yun eh. Sobrang mura po mag troll nowadays. AI ka lang. Next thing may 1 million accounts ka na paulit-ulit pwede nila maglagay ng tawa-tawa na emoji. So, mukhang medyo desperate mode na yung mga kaibigan natin na iba. So, hanggang dyan na lang mga ginagawa nila. But we have to have some serious discussion. And one of the things I've been saying since last week is, kailangan talaga magkakaroon tayo ng clarity on a couple of important core issues. On different levels. No? Actually, yun yung column natin tomorrow on the Philippine Daily Inquirer. And I touched on this issue to a certain degree in some of my earlier articles and vlogs na pag-usapan natin. Now, before talking about the DDS as a shrinking minority, of course, we have to be fair and look at the strengths that the Duterte still have. Kaya katulad ng sinabi ni Sir Ronald Llamas, baka mamaya manalo na naman ng mga Dutertes by default, right? Not by virtue of their strength, but by virtue of their relative strength. Or relative, parang fewer weaknesses, kumbaga, di ba? Now, first of all, of course, katulad ng sinulat natin on Nikkei Asia, of course, yun ang medyo wala sa ating mga ka-DDS na vloggers, sa mga others kasi wala namang mga legit na publications, mga yan. At reminders lang po, reminders lang po, you're not an expert in something kung nag-aral ka lang in some university, whatever. You're an expert in something if you have an established talagang body of work, medyo papuntang 1,000 Google Scholar citation, hindi yung papuntang 0, di ba? But anyway, we don't want to go down that road again, but just to remind people na sana may standards tayo. So yung mga ibang kaibigan natin na nag-feeling na pa-effect na expert. Anyway, you see, objectively speaking, yes, of course. Katulad ng in-argue natin in this latest article natin ng Nikkei Asia, just the biggest financial newspaper in the world na may-ari din ng Financial Times. In-argue natin na, of course, may points of strength naman ang Dutertes. Again, in relative terms. In a sense that pagdating sa mga Dutertes, of course, andon yung Vismin, particularly solid south vote base, particularly in Davao region and some regions in Mindanao and some pockets also in Luzon region. Pangalawa, they have also support base among yung mga kaibigan natin na mahilig mag-peace rally na mukhang at the end of the day hanggang 1 million lang talaga yun ang maximum na pwede nila i-block vote, sabi ng iba. And then of course meron din yung mga ex-generals, yung mga dating sundalo, ang mga others na sympathetic sa kanya, and then of course yung minamahal natin na kapitbahay, friendly na kapitbahay na China, right? So of course it's always foolish to be dismissive and say tapos na itong mga to, because as I said, di ba, inargue ko since last year pa na a populist comeback is always a possibility. Pinag-usapan natin the case of Donald Trump, pinag-usapan natin the case of Silvio Berlusconi in the past, pinag-usapan natin the case of the Thaksin's, for instance, in the case of Thailand. We can go on and on with many cases whereby yung mga supposedly washed up na, laos na, completely marginalized na populists, they make a strong comeback. Brazil is an interesting case because maybe not Bolsonaro, but some other new forms of far-right populists are also coming to the surface, including one of them was si Marcel na I think was like my age, and now is like number 2 or 3 in the pre-election surveys for the next presidential race in Brazil. So, yes, I'm the last person to underestimate the Dutertes precisely because pinag-usapan naman natin year after year after year ano yung mga foundations or pillars of power. Nevertheless, guys, you don't want to also commit another type of error, right? So there are two types of error, false positive and false negative, right? You think na malakas sila, yung pala hindi sila ganun kalakas, or you think mahina sila, yung pala hindi sila ganun kahina. So I think it's always very important to get that balance, and you can only get that balance if you look at the actual data and the developments on the ground. At yun po yung ginagawa natin. So on a quarterly basis, we look at the available data. On a daily basis, tinitignan natin yung ups and downs. On an hourly and minute-by-minute basis, kinakausap natin mga iba't ibang kampo, ano mga information natin dyan, yung mga operators katulad ni Ronald Llamas. No, I'm just kidding. No, to figure out what's happening on the ground. Because after all, if there's one thing that we learned from the Filipino voters is medyo fickle naman talagang voters, right? 10, 15 years ago, gusto nila yung Dan Matuwid. Before that, gusto nila at some point si Erap, and the next thing they like Duterte. And now, sabi nga ni Erap, weather lang yan. So we see actually a significant drop in terms of support base for the Dutertes. So, interestingly, during the second quarter of last year, the Duterte base of support was already down by a few points from close to 30% to just over 20%, right? So, yun nga, katulad ng pinag-usapan natin, it's not only the numbers in terms of snapshot, it's the trajectory that matters. So if you look at it, for instance, in the second quarter of last year, the number of pro-Duterte support was down to 20%. That was already a reduction, right? And then, if you look at the latest survey na available, although later this week, we're gonna interview si Professor Ranjit Wright because meron namang bagong survey at mukhang medyo alanganin talagang mga DDS. Yung latest naman ay 15% na lang sila. And so we see a clear downward trajectory, right? From close to a third, right? Down to around 20+%, then 20%, and then 15% by the fourth quarter of last year. At sabi ko nga, half-jokingly, baka mamaya 3% na lang mga yan pag ma-impeach na yung kanilang ma-impeach na lang si the greatest ever vice president, right? So yun lang. So what I'm saying is that if you look at the trajectory, it's not very good. In fact, pinag-usapan din natin not long ago, if you look at the approval ratings of Sara Duterte, pababa rin at pababa. Her net approval ratings are just above 20%, which is really, really low compared to other vice presidents, with the exception of the case of, the case of Vice President Robredo, but that was an exceptional case because the whole machinery of state, everyone was against her. And unlike the case of BBM, the attack by the administration on Robredo was unabashed and systematic. At least in the case of BBM, meron pa siyang pretension to, hindi, pwede pa yan, never say never, di ba? At least may moment of unity pa rin. So talaga makikita natin in the case of Sara Duterte, her approval ratings are really on a downward trajectory, just over 20% net approval ratings. Her numbers also in Visayas and Mindanao has been... So, kanina pinag-usapan natin yung pillars of influence of the Dutertes. But those pillars of influence are also not parang set in stone. So, nakikita natin sa Mindanao pa lang, pababa yung numbers ni Sara Duterte. Double-digit yung decline niya in the Pulse Asia survey. In Vismin also, significant yung decline niya. Double-digit also in the fourth quarter of last year. So, even the Vismin vote, while solid enough compared to Balance Luzon, nevertheless, even there, you can see decline. Yung ex-generals naman ng mga others, yes, maingay sila. Yes, I never dismiss the possibility of something crazy out of this world. But nevertheless, there's still fringe elements within the security establishment elite. In fact, they're not even part of the establishment by some definition. And then pagdating naman sa China, nakita naman natin may limitation din yung influence ng China dahil nga, after all, malakas talaga ang relasyon ng Pilipinas at Japan, at US, at New Zealand, at Australia, at India, at maraming bansa na anti-China rin. And nakita rin natin, base sa mga pag-aaral, yung mga pro-China narratives ay hindi rin ganun ka-successful. So there was a study in September last year, lumabas ng aid data, kumbaga, kung saan pinag-aralan nila itong mga troll operations na sobrang pro-China pero napansin nila hindi ganun ka-effective, 'di ba? So in short, while you don't want to be dismissive of them, you also have to look at the fact that hindi rin sila, they're not a 12-foot giant. Probably they're at most a 6-foot. I don't want to even use the word giant. 6-foot pampagulo, 'di ba? So this is the study, for instance, right? And China is very practical. If they think na hindi ka naman, wala ka naman. So this is the study I was talking about. So this is the study by AIDATA. You can check it out. So tinignan yung mga trolls, yung mga kunyaring influencers na kunyari nag-aaral, kunyari scholar effect, yung pala talagang bayaran talaga, 'di ba? Tapos ngayon lakas maghanas sa atin ng mga other things, 'di ba? Talagang projection. But anyways, going back to this. So, my point is, my pillars of power, but those pillars of power are not unshakable, are not invincible. And that's why, right, mahalaga na magkakaroon tayo ng clarity in terms of how we want to move forward. Because nung isang araw, marami nagalit sa atin na naman. Ayan na naman tayo, yung mga kaibigan natin, na sabi nila, ayan na naman si Richard, di ba? You have to understand, ganito ang politika. You're explaining to me how politics operates. Like, seriously. But okay, fine, never mind. Net, you have to, pragmatic tayo. Let's win and then the rest could follow. Well, I always say, right, how you win also matters. Because if you win in the wrong way, or makachamba ka lang, and then you think that hindi pala chamba yan, you think talaga you got the winning formula, yari ka sa next election, diba? Oh, so by the way, these are the numbers we're looking at. So for instance, if you look at it, because this is the only one we have. Sorry talaga, yung mga sinasabi na, tignan natin yung elections, ano nangyayari sa elections. Guys, hindi yun yung reference point dapat. We only have one data set by one authoritative source that looks at sino ba talaga ang exclusively pro-Duterte at exclusively pro-Marcos. Kaya nga DDS yung term ko dyan. Kasi ito yung core support base. Iba po yung mandato sa election, iba po yung approval or satisfaction rate. Iba yung talaga kaninong team ka if it goes down to it. And of course, when it comes to elections, you have to choose a side. So if you look at here, close to 40% ay pro-administration, right? In NCR, the numbers are 42%. In Balance Luzon, 43%, in Visayas, 37%, only 25% in Mindanao. So actually, dahil sa Mindanao lang bumaba ito, otherwise, closer to majority ito. Among ABC and D, it's more or less the same, and then slightly higher at E. Nung tinanong sino yung mga purely pro-Duterte, only 15%, down from 20% earlier. NCR, 6% lang. Balance Luzon, 3% lang. Visayas, 12% lang. Only in Mindanao, you see a close to a majority, but not even in Mindanao. So this is interesting. So what we see in this survey is that kahit sa Mindanao, hindi complete yung grip ng mga Dutertes. In fact, only 48% were full Team Duterte in Mindanao. Now, so that tells you guys, actually, super minority na lang yung mga DDS na yan. Right? So yung mga nagsasabi dyan na, ay Richard, kailangan syempre yung mga ibang kandidato, they have to play safe kasi sayang naman yung mga pro-Duterte. Like, first of all, what tells you that the core DDS will vote for an Aquino or Pangilinan? O you tell me why. Now, I understand there's the whole Rosa conversation about Robredo, Sara, and how there are many in Davao who voted rather for Robredo rather than BBM, and that there's an anti-Marcos constituents in Mindanao because of the legacy of Marcos dictatorship and the horrible things of the Marcos dictatorship in Mindanao. I agree with that. But that's Robredo. That's Lenny, right? Or that's Pinoy back in the day. How sure are you that the same is translatable to, let's say, BAM or to Pangilinan, right? So first of all, I have some factual concerns with that kind of line of argument na kailangan maging pa-safe kasi baka may makuha pa tayong DDS votes. Right? Kaya wag tayong masyadong magsalita on the Sara impeachment, or let's not make a stance clear. Well, for me, even from a very pragmatic point of view, you're talking already about a minority. And even in Mindanao, right? Of course, you want to get some votes in Mindanao, but even in Mindanao, the pure team DDS is a maximum of 48%, plus 3, minus 3. So even in Mindanao, marami dyan na hindi na pro-Duterte, if not anti-Duterte or pro-admin na. But actually, for me, the real numbers that matter to me are the numbers in other sections. So if you look at it, yung opposition, yung liberal traditional opposition is only 7%. Highest is in NCR 10%, lowest is in Mindanao at 4%. Highest is in Visayas, 14%. Lowest is in Mindanao at 4%, and then just 10% in NCR and 5% in Balanced Luzon. So that's an interesting number, meaning sobrang maliit yung talagang all-out liberal party, ganon. And then, this is where things get interesting. So if you look at it, the bulk of the vote is either pro-admin or independent, meaning neither admin nor Duterte, right? That's 27% in NCR, 26% in Balanced Luzon, 32% in Visayas, and 19% in Mindanao. And then, even more important, there's 14% that is kind of politically demobilized for now. So, now, puntahan naman natin yung elections, right? So, in some of the surveys we have here, hindi lang yung mga online, meron tayo dito. So, Bam Aquino is at around 22.1% dito sa February 2025. And it's up from 19% in November 2024. So, that's a 3.1% increase. Si Kiko naman dito sa survey na medyo bumaba, but Kiko is already in Magic 12 in the SWS survey. So actually, if you look at it, Bam and Kiko Pangilinan, almost within the range sila. Right? The Tulfos are doing very well. Almost sigurado na babalik si Tito Soto. So it looks like alanganin talaga si Chizo Escudero. I don't think he would last as the president of Senate if babalik si Tito Soto and if dissatisfaction continues. But you know what's interesting here is that tumaas ng husto yung numbers ni Bongo, for instance, 18%, 20%, from 24 to 42%. So dito nakita natin, for instance, Bongo is becoming the champion of Team DDS and is the most competitive candidate they have. But nevertheless, if you look at numbers of Bam and Kiko Pangilinan, they only need a few percentage points to be within the magic circle, right? And if you look at actually the sub-demographic, and I want to look at the sub-demographic for Kiko and all, right? And Bam. So, in NCR, again, these are all data, guys. So, okay, so we're looking at the data sets here, right? So, Bam is only 20% in NCR, which, by the way, is very anti-Duterte at this point in time. He's only 14% in CAR region. Region 1, 14.1%, 11.2% Region 2, Region 3, 16.8%, Region 4, 21.8%, and ang taas niya sa Region 5 at 38.5%. So obviously, he can improve a lot in NCR region, definitely in CAR and Region 2 and Region 3, right? So, if you look at it geographically, I'm not sure he needs that much, actually, the DDS support. In fact, what he needs is to get those independents, those non-committal people, and basically the majority anti-Duterte or non-Duterte aligned on his side. If you look at the numbers of Kiko Pangilinan, interestingly, for instance, he's 24.3% in NCR, doing very well here, 16% in CAR, 16% also in Region 1, the same almost in Region 2, 26% in Region 3, and then 21.6% Region 4, 31.8% Region 5. So malakas talaga sa Region 5 ang mga quote-unquote Team Liwanag. But what they really need to improve is, for instance, in Region 4, Region 2, Region 1, CAR, and I think in NCR, there's still a lot of room for improvement. In short, what I'm saying is that ang dami mong makuhang votes sa NCR region pa lang at sa Luzon region pa lang, especially yung mga areas na anti-Duterte. For instance, if you go to the so-called solid North region, my goodness, baka zero na lang mga Duterte, pro-Duterte sentiment dyan. Pero sobrang anti-Duterte yung mga tao dyan. So, if you go wishy-washy on the Sara impeachment issue, you're not gonna get much there. Because people want clarity on that issue, right? So, in fact, I'm more certain that if you have clarity on the Sara impeachment issue, that a solid North is more willing to vote for an Aquino than you playing wishy-washy and the BBM willing to vote for an Aquino or Pangilinan or Team Liwanag or whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? So in short, tama yung sinasabi ni Ronald na ang laki ng room for improvement in regions that actually are either anti-Duterte or sobrang mababa yung approval rating sa mga Duterte. Kaya when I say hindi kailangan talaga ng DDS vote is because first of all, they're shrinking minority, right? Pangalawa, ang laki ng room for improvement among independents and regions which are very anti-Duterte, right? Now, this doesn't mean na dapat pro-Marcos ka. No, I think it's okay to criticize the Marcos administration. You have to do that. You have to call it out. But I think there are lots of people na pro-admin pero sobrang galit sa mga Dutertes, they're willing still to vote for you. Remember, 12 ang pwedeng pili na candidates, which brings me to my third argument. Maraming tumawa at pinagtawanan yung speech ni BBM yung isang araw when he was talking about the difference between his team and the DDS team, right? And the reason why is because, let's be honest, you're talking about a lot of people in the admin slate who have very suspect or questionable record when it comes to resisting the worst elements of the Duterte administration. May mga ilan dyan bumoto in favor of Pogo as recently as last year. May mga ilan dyan na super aligned sa mga Dutertes. Cayetanos back in the day, let's just call it out. May mga ilan dyan na pabudots-budots at naging malaya dahil sa ano ni Duterte. Meron naman dyan, dating Ronald Llamas ni Digong, ngayon biglang Mr. West Philippines na. Tapos biglang pagdating sa Fort Worth, biglang kailangan niya maglabas ng thesaurus at padala yung issue sa... So, actually, dun sa admin slate, ang daming mga questionable elements dyan na mukhang meron pa ring residual DDS Dutertismo dyan. So, there are many anti-Duterte elements or pro-admin elements who may be willing to rather vote for Pangilinan or Mendoza or BAM or whatever if they feel that these people are actually more reliable, right, on the accountability of Duterte's than the other ones. So, do you get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying here? So, when I'm raising these issues, it's not out of thin air. We're looking at psychology, we're looking at alignments and realignments, we're looking at data, we're looking at region by region basis, guys. Region by region basis. All right? Kasi po may access tayo sa mga datos rin, di ba? At the same time, we're also looking at the big picture here. So, for me, mas malaking chance na mag-improve ang numbers mo if you're clear on the Sara issue because for me, the propensity for realignment is higher on the solid north side than on the solid south side. And the good thing is that, base sa experience natin, even if you're critical of the admin, mas tolerant sa kritisismo yung mga iba kaysa yung kabila. Right? And most important, yung kabila, shrinking minority niya. Even the DDS base, even in Mindanao, is barely a majority right now based on the available data. But I was promised that I'll have the latest data for first quarter of this year soon. So baka lumit pa lalo yan. So, yan ang sinasabi ko mga kameta. Yan ang sinasabi ko. So when I mention these things, when we make these interventions, these are based on actual data, trend line analysis, right? Kaya naintindihan ako bakit galit na galit yung mga kaibigan natin because, diba? Because nabubuking na talagang they're not the same level anymore. Anyway, let's go back to a bigger question. Because this is not only about practicality, right? This is not only about practical consideration. Everything I said right now was just to question those who were saying, ay, kailangan natin maging pragmatic. So I was just able to prove to you that argument is actually very flimsy if you look at actual data, trend lines, and realignments sa ating politika. But for me, the bigger issue actually is not practical consideration. The bigger issue for me is how to reinvent the opposition for the 21st century. Because the very fact that you have people na walang bahid ng corruption, na walang bahid na budots or I mean, diba, fill in the blank. I still are struggling in the surveys, right? So that tells you still have a crisis of opposition. You still have a problem with branding. The fact that only 7% are with traditional opposition tells you something drastic has to be done here. And this is where I think we should listen to also how our friends are in the US, among others, are learning also their hard lessons. So one of the arguments that is emerging, for instance, after the loss of Kamala to Trump is that as one junior senator from Arizona, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, recently said, the problem with us Democrats is that we fear to experiment with new things, right? We play too safe, right? Sabi niya. And he absolutely makes sense because if you look at it, one of the reasons why Trump was able to get a lot of votes from non-traditional bases, meaning Gen Z, Latino men, even African American men, among others, and college students, a lot of college students, is because he was willing to experiment with new things, including sitting for 2-3 hours with Joe Rogan, where he could potentially look like a fool and old Ulyanin na guy, and he didn't. Of course, he came out very strong. And a couple of other things that he did. For instance, he suddenly backpedaled a little bit on some issues like abortion. But you get what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day, Trump, at the age of almost 80, did many new things in this campaign, even compared to his first disruptive campaign from 2015 to 16. So if there's one thing I can give to that guy is that he embraces the philosophy of disruption. And then compared that to the Democrat side, my goodness, pinilit si Biden kahit fill in the blank. And then yung replacement kay Biden ay vice-presidente niya. So, how could you win an election when So, when people, obviously that was an election about change. So you're automatically shooting yourself in the foot if your candidate is still the incumbent, right? Basically the vice president. And worse, Kamala refused to really disown anything about Biden when she could have and she should have, in my opinion. But anyway, napag-usapan na natin ang issue na yan. I don't want to relitigate that issue over and over again, right? But going back to this, one of the things I like hearing from a lot of Democrats, younger generation Democrats, including some of them who overperform Kamala, including places like Arizona where Democrats lost, but some of the Democratic candidates were able to make it to Senate. If you look at it, their argument basically is we have to be more open to politics of disruption, to outside-the-box ideas, but most importantly, we have to be less fearful of politics of conviction. Masyado tayong pa-safe. Mga tao, like, so you always allow the other side to dictate the terms of contestation, to dictate the meta-narratives. Trump basically set the tone on issues of immigration, national security, and then the Democrats just adjusted to him. So they were fighting MAGA on MAGA's territory. That was their absolute mistake. And then they relied, and this is very important to me. If you look at the proper analysis, you don't forget about me. Go and listen to the whole like Ezra Klein analysis, among others, who look at actually mga advisors ni Kamala, among others. These are a bunch of deracinated apparatchiks who were still running Obama's campaign in 2025, right? These are people who were running essentially a 2008 style campaign in 2025. When in fact, 2024 was different from 2020, right? So, advice lang po natin sa mga kaibigan natin iba dyan ay learn from the Democrats, right? At least the Democrats, some of them are accepting the fact na masyado silang pa-cute, masyado silang pa-safe, ayan tuloy nangyari sila ni Donald Trump. And then now they're gonna pay the price. Nevertheless, at least they're getting it together. And what I like about at least Democrats, some of them, is they're having a post-mortem. Bernie Sanders immediately comes out and says, the party that abandons the working classes, people should not be surprised that the working class people has abandoned them. Immediately, right? And then you have younger, more mainstream senators, among others, coming from Massachusetts to Arizona, among others. So, at least may post-mortem sila yung mga Democrats na yan. Although, of course, you still have the Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer and all who are still, trying to say, hindi, it's not the end of the world. But you get what I'm saying? Sa atin is puro na lang Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi approach. We don't have the Bernie post-mortem. We don't have the younger senators from Massachusetts, Arizona post-mortem. And the reason why I'm using the Democrats as an example is because this is a very fresh elections we're talking about. The parallels are huge. And siguro if I talk about, I don't know, parties in Germany, SPD or something, you may not relate. So that's why I'm not saying we're exactly in the same boat as Americans, but I'm saying there are a lot of lessons to learn here. So ang concern ko dito is actually there's some people who are relying on a strategy that got the yellows into power in 2010 and 2016 but may not work anymore in 2025 and absolutely didn't work in 2019 and 2022. So kaya sabi ko, you have to push the boundaries. And one of the issues for me that is very important is that you have to have clarity. You have to have clarity of messaging, consistency in messaging, but also clarity in terms of your conviction politics. Bakit kamo? Dahil structurally speaking, and this is really basic political science, right? Structurally speaking, during periods of hyperpolarization, meaning napakataas yung partisanship, napakataas yung fault lines, no? Napakatindi, yung mga fault lines, yung mga differences among others, actually, ang hinahanap ng mga voters ay a certain degree of clarity. And the good thing with the Senate race is that hindi lang isang you're fighting for 12 slots. So to stand out, actually clarity may help you more than being vague, because everyone is almost vague. What's the position of Tolentino again? What's the position of Budutsboy again? What's the position of Cayetano again? I can go. What's the position of So actually clarity may help more than so-called strategic ambiguity. But even more importantly, and this is where the Democratic example doesn't apply to the Philippines. At least in the United States, the Democratic Party is a real party with real foundations and very mobilized chapters all across the country, a donor base among others. Now, of course, we can have a long conversation about what the Donald Trump 2.0 administration can do to them. There's already this fantastic piece by two leading scholars of democracy and foreign affairs, whereby they talk about how Trump may essentially weaponize the federal state against Democrats and the Democratic establishment and donors. Okay, I don't want to go down that road for now because we don't have time for that, and there's a whole different conversation. But what I'm saying is that at least yung Democratic Party, this is a centuries-old party. May foundation, malakas among other things. Now, if you look at the opposition in the Philippines, not only does it lack all of those things the Democratic Party has, including a degree of policy clarity, but also if you look at it, my goodness, look at it, 26% ng ating mga kababayan ay neither opposition na liberal, nor Duterte, nor admin, and then 14% are completely demobilized. You put that together, that's basically 40%, right? It's basically 40%. So that means 40% of Filipinos can still be mobilized to your side, right? For me, yun dapat ang strategy talaga ng Team Liwanag. Try to reactivate the pink movement, try to win over the independents, and yes, you never know, right? By doing the right thing on the Sara impeachment issue, for all you know, even yung mga yung mga kapsat natin dyan, baka lalambot sila kasi they rather vote for a Kiko Pangilinan, or I don't know, Heidi Mendoza who's clear on Mary Grace Piatos than say, I don't know, a Tolentino or like a Budots or whatever na paano-ano lang, di ba? Papiyaw-piyaw lang at papalit-palit, di ba? So, or Jaime Marcos for that matter, right? For all you know, baka mas marami pang Ilocos Norte. No, but you get what I'm saying. So, for me, we are in a moment when actually it pays to be genuine, sincere, and go for the politics of conviction. And you know what? Ultimately, if you're better to lose a race where you actually did the right thing and lost than to lose a race whereby you actually nagtumbling-tumbling ka, nag-acrobatics ka, tapos talo ka pa rin. Mas masaklap po yan. Because kung tumambling ka, tapos hindi ka pa nanalo, mahirapan ka sa next election cycle. Pero kung maayos yung ginawa mo, even if you lost, and you lost probably narrowly, ang laki ng chance mo to build on that for the next election cycle. So there's the shadow future, there's a long-term strategy. Do you get what I'm saying, guys? So, yun po yung konteksto ng mga interventions natin. Go with the politics of conviction and go with the politics of clarity when sobrang polarized yung political environment mo, and when you have the data sets that we're looking at right now, and when the DDS is actually a shrinking minority and it doesn't really make sense to try to appeal to them for a number of reasons that I've mentioned. But for me talaga, the biggest issue here is how do you activate that 40%, right? And malamang, maraming bumoto kay Lenny na pink movement ay andyan sa 26% and 7%. And baka marami rin dyan sa 14% na. And then a few maybe are pro-admin na ngayon, right? So, yun ang dapat focusin na activate. And how are you gonna activate or reactivate rather that pink base or progressive base, Team Liwanag base, kung pa-safe ka, 'di ba? Or kasi simple lang point ko eh. Ilan pa bang Mary Grace Piatos hearings ang kailangan natin para sabihin natin na talagang. So yes, of course you have to, like say, yeah, you're gonna be a senator, judge, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I get it. Sige, say that. But at the end of the day, para sa akin na doing the right thing actually might be also the right thing electorally speaking, pragmatically speaking. And this is quite unprecedented, right? Whereby actually being right could actually get you more votes. Right? Kaya nga sabi ko in fact, if there's one lesson we should learn from the Trumps and the Dutertes of this world is, the reason why ang lakas ng support sa kanila in their heydays is because they're seen as authentic. They're seen as, like, hindi nila kinakaya, hindi sila pa-safe, hindi sila pa-cute. Gusto ng tao yung palaban. Gusto ng tao yung, yung klaro ka, yung mga ganon. So, that's where I'm coming from. So, obviously, I'm not saying when you go to Davao, openly go and attack Duterte. You don't want to do that, right? But what I'm saying is that instead of looking at that angle, yung 15% or shrinking na DDS base, right? Look at the rest of Mindanao who are not pro-Duterte. Look at the rest of Luzon kung saan napakahina mo. I mean, look at it. Again, as I said, Region CAR, Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, ang laki ng points of improvement for mga opposition candidates. And by the way, I just discussed Kiko, and bam, there are so many other good candidates I can talk about, right? Wait, bakit may Mark Oleta? We can talk about Heidi Mendoza. So let's talk about Heidi Mendoza, for instance, who we are hoping to interview this coming Friday. So look at Heidi's numbers in NCR is her practically highest number, 4.5, and Region 4, but she has a lot of room for improvement in Region 1, right? Well, she has room for improvement across the board. Nasa top 25 na si Heidi Mendoza ngayon. And for me, she can move easily to top 20 and top 15 if she keeps on just coming off as authentic and strong and solid. Lucas Espiritu is not too far, right? At number 27. Again, Lucas Espiritu is actually higher than Jimmy Bundok. Si Jimmy na DDS data at ngayon ABS-CBN, the greatest production, biglang iba ng inip ng hangin, 'di ba? Franz Castro is basically tied with Jimmy Bundok, right? So that's what I'm saying, guys. Interesting. So politics of conviction helps in these elections because let's be honest, I think all of us have seen enough evidence, enough hearing, enough kababalakan, not only under in the past 2 years, but in the past 8 years, right? Under certain notorious times to know where we should stand on certain issues. So I'm sorry to say this, but from both an electoral standpoint and more importantly, from a moral and ethical standpoint, I think it's absolutely important to be clear about where you stand on some core issues which are extremely, extremely important. Extremely important, guys, when it comes to mobilizing people. And as I said, again, do not forget, imagine if Heidi Mendoza, for instance, gets to top. Sabi natin, yung ibang kandidato, pa-safe, pa-cute, biglang you have someone like Heidi coming off as extremely authentic. Next thing you know, kalate ng 26% na yan or kalate ng 14% mag-mobilize sa kanya, she'll immediately jump to top 15. Right? So, yun po talaga ang dapat approach natin dito. Right? Yun po talaga approach natin. So, yes, I'll say this again. Be authentic, be sincere, and take risks. Take risks. Because what's even worse is not to take risks, pa-safe ka, tas matalo ka, tas you'll be seen as another trapa na pa-safe, and then good luck na sa'yo in the next elections. Right? So, actually, I'm very happy to see that, some of these candidates na matino-tino are coming up and they can keep on building that. 2-3 months from now, my goodness, these guys can go easily up to top 15%, 20%, right? And at least there's one thing, for instance, with Heidi Mendoza, Ma'am Mendoza, she's absolutely clear about yung kababalakan na nangyari sa confidential fund at paano inabuso yung confidential fund na yan. Alright? Okay, so, I'll keep it there. I don't want to say more kasi people misinterpret na ba, ito na naman si Richard na nag-attack na naman, nagyayabang na naman, whatever. Guys, come on. Let's get serious, all right? Let's look at the numbers, let's look at the data, and let's operate accordingly. But most important, guys, nakakapagod na yung, basta let's make sure manalo tayo. Alam mo, yun yung style nila mga Rojas nun. Where did that get him? Right? Yun yung style. I mean, I can go on with all of these cases. We have to... Guys, ito lang masasabi ko. Ayusin na natin to. Ito na yung election kung saan talaga malaki yung chance na if ever kahit hindi manalo yung mga Team Liwanag, magkakaroon po tayo ng momentum para sa the big one, the 2028 elections, presidential elections. Yun dapat yung mindset mo. Right? So as much as mahalaga na manalo ka sa election na ito, mas mahalaga para sa akin yung palakasin mo yung Team Liwanag for 2028 elections. So let me go back again to this, right? Alam mo, inisip ko itong podcast natin. Bakit natin ginagawa itong podcast na to? Because, why are we doing this podcast? Ginagawa ba lang natin ito para every day lang, at the end of the day, may pang outlet tayo just to get things out, para magpa-cute tayo? No. Actually, I realize, the reason why, kahit pagod tayo, kahit 11, midnight na and all of that, tuloy-tuloy itong ginagawa natin, is because, naiwala po tayo na may pag-asa itong bansa natin if and when we get certain basic things done. And for me, politics of conviction and sincerity can really, really give us a lot of hope, right? So let me, again, 3 p.m. daw dun sa mga kaibigan natin sa Europe among other places or gitnang silangan, right? Again, so thank you so much sa lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin throughout the years. I'll tell you what. In fact, yung isa sa mga top supporters natin, parang nainis siya nung isang araw. Sabi niya, bakit kami lang nagbibigay ng stars and support here? Now, obviously, salamat naman sa Diyos dahil sa day job natin, kahit papaano na-afford naman natin na yung mga basics, production and all of that. But actually, tama po yung sinasabi ng mga ibang kaibigan natin. Bakit sila lang sumusuporta dito ng concretely? Because at the end of the day, guys, you have to invest in things, right? You have to invest in thinkers, in candidates, in movements, right? Na sa tingin nyo ay nagbibigay ng bagong perspektibo or bagong pag-asa among other things. So even the token, I don't know, star or stickers or whatever you give you, it goes a long way because it affirms to us na marami sa ating mga kababayan, diba, whether dito or around the world, are willing to invest in something that they feel gives a fresh perspective, fresh energy, and a way forward. So thank you so much dun sa mga ibang supporters natin na they've been sticking with this little movement we're creating here. Kasi sa totoo lang, we started this meta nung 2022 elections just, essentially to have an outlet in terms of frustrations, humor, etc., but also for public education. But the more we do this, we realize na hindi lang dapat public education. Dapat action din tayo, di ba? Public action din. Collective action din gusto natin. Public policy intervention pong kailangan natin, di ba? So we're moving in that direction. So don't be surprised if I become more and more interventionist on public policy issues because as much as I love being a public educator, I think mas mahalaga para sa atin to push things in the right direction, right? At as I said, this is our way, our little way of honoring our great ancestors, among others, including Jose Rizal, who is now in civilizations. My goodness. Did you ever think, guys, darating ang araw kung saan si Dr. Jose Rizal ang magiging hero sa civilizations game, right? I mean, honestly, that's incredible. I mean, it used to be Napoleon. And Dr. Jose Rizal would be seen as the representative of all the anti-colonial movements across the ex-Spanish colonies, including in Mexico and the Maya civilization, among others, right? It's incredible. It's incredible. So look at it. If you do the right thing, Rizal was not able to have political success in his own time, but look at it. He's immortalized, and until today, he's inspiring us. More than 100 years later. So much so that he's now in practically the most popular game on earth, or one of the top 3 most popular games on earth, and he's seen as hero of not only Philippines but the entire Malayan people and even the Mayan people and even the Latino people. It's incredible, and I was so proud when I saw it. Parang naging emotional ako, diba? Like, oh my God, darating na araw na maglalaro ka ng Jose Rizal on and this is like one of the most famous games out there in the world. Nakaka-proud, and this is what I'm saying. It's okay to lose in this world or in your lifetime. But if you do the right thing, guys, you will be immortalized in the best way possible. And who knows who are you going to inspire in 50 years, in 100 years, in 200 years. But for me, I'm looking at 2028, all right? Do the things that you have to do right now in 2025 para ma-reactivate yung Team Liwanag for 2028 And who knows, baka isa or dalawa makapasok pa in 2025, right? That's what I'm saying, guys. That's what I'm saying. Alright? Kaya ganyan dapat approach natin. So kaya, no matter how much na ina-attack tayo, including people who you would expect more from, ginagaslight pa tayo. Ano daw, para smear campaign, mga ganyan. Like, I'm sorry. Wag naman mga tablet style na ganyan. Alright? Guys, we have to have intelligent conversation. We have to have data-driven conversation. We have to go region by region. You have to look at all the data. You have to look at the big picture. But more importantly, you have to look at conviction. Because yun yung malungkot na masaklap na nangyari. Pa-safe na nga and all, natalo pa. At tuloy, 27% wala. 40% na ating kababayan ay neither Duterte nor Marcos nor Liberal Party or whatever, 'di ba? You have to gain back the confidence of those people. You have to inspire them, and you're not gonna inspire them if you run the same kind of traditional style politics, right? So, what I'm saying is that it's good to be clean and not corrupt. Fantastic. It's good to have a nice, degree, whatever. But ang hanap ng tao ngayon, guys, ay tapang, risk taker, disruptor. Kaya believe tayo sa mga ibang candidates. Some of them we mentioned a while ago na umakyat na. Ngayon, top 25 na. Next thing you know, top 20 na. Next thing you know, top 15 na. And next thing you know, in 2028, next level na. Right? So on that note, thank you very much, guys. By the way, as I mentioned on our YouTube right now, we already have a membership open. So parang subscription na ito because we're hoping to make sure now we have sustainable basis for doing more and more production level stuff. Hopefully later this week, I'll do an explainer, medyo Lex Friedman, Huberman style, darkroom style, etc. And we hope to do more and more of that. We'll have also Heidi Mendoza with us and a couple of other change makers and progressive candidates to discuss yung darating na election. So again, your subscription, your support, your stars, your prayers, all of those things matter because it just affirms our sense that the Filipinos worth fighting for. Kaya fight also for us. Just kidding. All right, thank you very much. And don't forget to subscribe to us on different channels. Spotify, Richard Haydarian, Deep Dive with Richard Haydarian. Dito on YouTube, Richard Haydarian Vlogs. And then of course, Richard Foronda Haydarian naman dito sa Facebook. And of course, ano pa ba? Sorry, wala akong TikTok today. May ng internet. So thank you so much, right? It's about, it's the thoughtfulness that counts, right? It's about putting your heart in the right place. On that note, thank you very much. God bless, and talk to you soon.